Hey everybody, how we doing this week? It is Sean here. So I am left with the privilege of having to do this week's show without Hugh. Hugh is off doing his property stuff, and I this week was trying to find something that I could talk about on my own. So it's not going to be a long show because I'm not necessarily terribly comfortable speaking on my own without Hugh here. But what I wanted to do was, hello, how we doing? I wanted to the mini cast live. Thanks for joining in. I wanted to go over this week what I was seeing on my social media feeds. If you would watch Hugh and I speak a couple weeks ago, we watched the film, the documentary, A Social Dilemma, where one of the things it raised in that film or in that documentary was that I guess it answered the question to some degree why people believe things that I think are ridiculous. And just to be clear, I'm sure that I believe things that people think are ridiculous as well. But when it comes to, let's say, political views and how people are aligning themselves with Donald Trump and the Trump administration, which I don't understand, that I'm not going to judge my friends for being supporters of Donald Trump because I disagree with the person. I don't think the person's capable to do that job. I think that's a separate thing. That's just my view. I'm entitled to that. But in the social dilemma, one of the points that it raised was the way social media works is it really serves up things that are interesting to you, things that you like. So if, let's say, you're shopping, you're going to see things that you're interested in that you already had shopped for. So if you were looking for, I don't know, a specific type of music, then you would start seeing suggestions for that kind of music. And the same thing happens politically. So this week, I've been staying away from social media and the news for the most part. But this week, I've paid attention to it because I knew I needed to talk about something. And what was coming up a lot was the election fraud piece. And I've watched it from a distance. And in my mind, I've not really paid too much attention to it because I haven't seen anything that would really qualify as evidence. And I ended up doing some research this week after seeing some videos pop up on my feed, specifically Melissa Carone. So I don't know if you've seen Melissa Carone. She was the star witness. I don't want to say star witness because that may very well be media making her seem bigger than, let's say, Rudy Giuliani would inflate her status to. But watch Melissa Carone give her testimony in Michigan. There was a few Facebook videos that flagged up for me that I was told by friends of mine that I should watch if I wanted to get a good idea on certain things that let's say a Trump supporter or somebody who supported the idea that there was fraud should be paying attention to. So I've collated some videos that I just want to go over today and just give it a shot. Maybe try to do my best to put aside my biases. And there was another video that came up that I wanted to share that really sort of frames why I guess why I struggle with why people are supporting, I guess, what's going on in the US, why my friends are supporting, I guess, who's in the White House and how they act and behave. And this is why I can't get to the point where I can make a judgment on their politics because I can't get past the way they behave and the way they communicate. So the first video I saw this week, I'm going to share the first video I saw, which was Kayleigh McEnany, who is the White House spokesperson. And I remember seeing her early doors when Trump was first elected. She was on CNN quite a bit. And she was quite articulate, quite good at making her argument, very intelligent person. And in my view, so I'm going to try to be very clear that this is my view, and I do have my biases. And as we progress in this short video, I'm going to be trying to put my biases aside. But when we take a look at Kayleigh McEnany, I feel like she has regressed a bit in this role. And some of the arguments that she used to make when she was on, let's say, CNN as a contributor, they were sensible. And the arguments she's making now on the podium are nonsense at times. And this was one of the examples that, I listened to the whole clip, and I'm not losing any context by playing this. So this clip is an example of one reason why I can't understand why people are really taking in this seriously. To me, so she's what's happening right now is the White House. They're going to be having Christmas parties, in-person Christmas parties, and somebody from the media asked a question about that. So let's play the video here. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this down and make sure I have it saved correctly because I don't have Hugh to check on me. So let me just try that again. I'm going to share screen. High production value here today, people. So we're going to be sharing Kaylee McEnany first, and I'm just showing this just to really give you an idea of where my biases are, why I have biases, and why I can't take a lot of people that, let's say, are associated with the White House right now seriously, because the arguments they're making aren't intelligent or don't make me think. If anything, it puts me off, and that's part of where we're at right now. It's very combative right now. We're not trying to win people with ideas. We're trying to win the argument and score points. So this is Kaylee McEnany. Did I share the sound? I hope I did. I'm just going to pull this back one more time. I'm really sorry. I think I screwed it up. If anybody wants to comment or give me their point of view on this or anything else, just drop me a message in the chat, and I will share everybody's comment, even the hellos. So let me try to share that again. I'm very paranoid because I don't have Hugo here. So Kaylee McEnany, when being asked about in-person White House parties.
We will engage in the celebration of Christmas, and there will be a Hanukkah celebration as well.
I think I started.
Does the White House, is it setting a good example for the public for the White House to be holding in-person holiday parties at a time when the CDC and other organizations are asking Americans to forego those kinds of celebrations for their own safety?
So first, I do want to make a comment to how that question was asked, and let me just play that back again, because I can understand why people get frustrated at the way these questions are asked.
Does the White House, is it setting a good example for the public for the White House to be holding in-person holiday parties at a time when the CDC and other organizations are asking Americans to forego those kinds of celebrations?
I want to be clear; it's a fair question. However, if I'm dealing with this White House, if I'm working as a correspondent, I'm going to be asking questions that are going to get the same response, but I'm going to do it in a way that doesn't show me as somebody who has a point of view. Now, again, I think this is a small nuanced thing that I'm sharing. But when you look at that question, you're saying, do you think it's responsible for the White House essentially to have parties? Where I would be framing that question slightly differently. So given the restrictions and given the advice from the CDC is to not have in-person parties, can you explain to Americans who maybe are avoiding those parties as to why you're having in-person parties? Would you be happy to explain that? Right there, you're getting the information you want in. The CDC is recommending against in-person parties. You're making it clear that I want to know why you're making clear your question is, I want to know why you or the White House is having in-person parties. So the question is framed to get a response. However, Kaylee McEnany is the White House spokesperson, and she needs to keep her shit together as far as I'm concerned. And she needs to answer the question and represent the White House well. I think difficult questions that are posed to the White House are fair. I think if I worked at the White House, if I worked for Donald Trump's White House, I would want all the criticism and questions that I could get. So I could then take those questions and I can then tell my supporters and I can tell people who want to support me why I'm doing the things I'm doing. You know, we're not doing things just because we're being difficult. We're doing things because we have a specific method and a plan in place to make America great again, or whatever the hell they're going to say. So let's see her response.
Yeah, so, if you can loot businesses, burn down buildings, engage in protest, you can also go to a Christmas party. You can celebrate the holiday of Christmas, and you can do it responsibly, which is why the East Wing has noted that they'll have smaller guest lists. Masks are going to be available. Social distancing is going to be encouraged. Hand sanitizing stations, among other measures. But we will engage in the celebration of Christmas, and there will be a Hanukkah celebration as well.
Does the White House?
So my issue with that is it is such a hyperbolic reply that it automatically takes an independent person like me and puts me off. And this was one of the things that stood out to me this week that made me think maybe I need to take a step back from my views and really think about how somebody else would think about this. Because when you go into your answer saying, well, if it's okay for looters to have a Christmas party, then it's okay for the White House to have a Christmas party. You're saying that the only two people in this world are looters or people that are working for the White House. So my family back in the States right now, they aren't looters. They are deciding to bypass any sort of in-person parties or get together. My parents are in their 60s right now, going on to 70s at some point, and they want to stay away from people and they want to be safe. And the recommendation for some businesses is to not have in-person parties. So they're not looters. And they don't work for the White House. So it's a hyperbolic answer in which your sole purpose is to score points, not to educate. I would have rather her said, and I would have been totally bought into this, We actually have safety measures in place. Like many Americans, like many Americans and many businesses who are deciding to safely get together, we are going to be putting in place social distancing, mask wearing, and we are going to keep the numbers attending these parties in person low. We're going to be outside whenever possible, and the risk for our get-togethers is very low because we're following guidelines as far as how we can safely get together. So right there, okay, we're answering the question. We're not just getting together for shits and giggles. We're actually going to be doing something to try to safely get together, because you can make an argument that one of the hardest things dealing with this pandemic right now is separation from people. And we've seen a lot of people, and I think it's a fair argument to make, that there's a lot of people who are, let's say, isolated because of this pandemic. And social interaction, if anything, in the last year has been shown to be vitally important to people's mental health and well-being. So you can make many arguments there, and you can answer that question without looking like an absolute dick. And I appreciate she's got the worst job in the world in my view. It's impossible to do her job well. But again, she could be winning hearts and minds on the other side of the coin if she had, let's say, I don't know, answered the question without making statements to looters, because we all know that looters are concerned about getting together for Christmas. Doesn't make sense to me. So that was that. So later in the week, I came across some interesting clips, and I thought I would look into it a bit more closely. But the first thing that came up was, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the video, which I think you're going to recognize, or a video that you're going to recognize, which is of Melissa Carone, Rudy Giuliani's witness. There was a few witnesses that spoke in Michigan, and it was at a hearing to really highlight instances of fraud in the Michigan election, presidential election. So I'm just going to jump ahead. Yes, I was watching this earlier. So I'm aware that there is the president is trying to change the outcome of the election, is trying to see, this is where my biases start coming into play, and I'm going to put that aside. So the White House firmly believes that there's enough evidence, and from what I can gather, it's based on thousands of affidavits they've collected from people, not necessarily people that worked counting ballots, but 1,000 people. And it is my understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, the Trump campaign had set up a website to try to capture this information. So they were soliciting information effectively. So this is Melissa Carone that we're going to see, and she went viral because of her testimony. She worked for Dominion, or works. I think she worked. I think she lost her job possibly. And she was an IT consultant, or worked in IT for the Dominion voting machine. So she was there to be IT support for the ballot counters. So let's have a listen, because this was something that jumped out on my stream, and I thought, okay, I'm going to start paying attention and really examine the voter fraud argument to see if it holds any water.
I know for a fact there was illegal activity going on there. People have pictures of people carrying ballots out of that place. There is pictures of vans full of ballots coming out of that place. These Democrats took every avenue possible to commit fraud in this election. The poll book is completely off. Completely off.
Off
that
30,000?
I'd say that poll book is off by over 100,000. That poll book. Why don't you look at the registered voters on there? How many registered voters are on there? Do you even know the answer to that?
No, I guess I'm trying to get to the bottom of this here.
Zero. There's zero.
So my question then is, if the
guess how many? Wait, what about the turnout rate? 120%.
Why we're not seeing the poll book off by 30,000 votes? That's not the case.
What did you guys do? Take it and do something crazy to it?
So how many ballots would you estimate in front of you that you observed were counted multiple times in the machine? Can you put a number to it, an estimated number?
At least 30,000.
At least 30,000.
This isn't counting the ballots that are found in rivers, the ballots found under rocks. I had called my manager over to a specific tabulating machine. At that point, I was just really frustrated and upset. I could tell what was going on. I knew what was going on at that point.
What was going on?
He was in on it. He was in on it. They were all in on it.
In on what?
They were cheating. It was very, very apparent. It was apparent he knew. It was apparent that he was in on it. And when he caught on to me knowing that he was in on it, he just wanted nothing to do with me.
So I was going to stop it for a second because I saw this and I found it an intriguing thing because Rudy Giuliani had spoken to her, had gotten her side of the story. So we know that she was an IT consultant. Her job was not to count ballots. She wasn't trained to count ballots. She wasn't trained to assess ballots. She was trained to monitor the machines. And there is an element of there's going to be stuff she's trained in as far as managing those ballots, managing those Dominion machines, which I believe, from what I understand, what I've read this week, are offline machines. They're not linked to the internet. They're machines that will. I think what happens is it'll count the vote, and you'll get it. I think the voter or somebody will get a ticket from that'll confirm that they voted and who their vote was, so that they know they had it right. And that machine counts the vote. So she's saying that there was multiple votes processed twice, and that the poll book is off. And what I've read so far is the poll book is essentially the list of registered voters, and that registered voter manifesto has to match that of the voter. So it's a way to compare. So if we have more votes on here than we have registered voters, then there's a problem. So right now we've seen a lot of bullshit talk and a lot of her opinion. So she signed an affidavit, but I haven't seen anything again that's really made me think she could be onto something. If anything, she's representing the argument really poorly. She just in the way she's presenting the information, there's no sense or effort to back up anything she said with any sort of evidence. And that's what I'm looking for, somebody who is, I'd like to think I'm fairly neutral and fairly balanced and fair. However, I do have my biases. There's no doubt about it. But even then, I need something to bite onto, because right now she's just coming across terribly from a messaging standpoint. She's making claims that either she's got some credentials she hasn't given us, or she knows something somehow that she wouldn't normally know. So she's made a statement that she's referred to the number of votes being, what did she say? Let me just go back to that again.
I'd say that poll book is off by over 100,000.
So how does she know the poll book is off by over 100,000? Her job is to monitor the Dominion machines, and to know that is off by 100,000, you would have to have some sort of understanding as to why.
That poll book. Why don't you look at the registered voters on there? How many registered voters are on there? Do you even know the answer to that?
No, I guess I'm trying to get to the bottom of this here.
Zero. There's zero.
But how does she know? Her job is she's an IT consultant, so she may have visibility of the poll books, but does she understand how the poll books work? Has she been trained on how the poll books work? How does she know it's zero? What evidence does she have? She's just saying it. You would think that if she knew why, she would be making that argument. I know they're not right because of X, Y, and Z.
So my question then is, if the
Guess how many? Wait, what about the turnout rate? 120%.
why we're not seeing the
So going back to that, and I did watch this in advance. So I was really trying to just, 120%. Maybe there's something to that. I'm gonna do some research and find out why it's 120%. And I searched as much as I could just to find the figures in question. And there was no official data that came out that said any of the polling areas were over 120%. There was one stat that came out that I think was in Detroit, maybe, and that data that came out was collating information from multiple polling areas, but it wasn't anything official, and it wasn't all the data in all of the, I guess, in Michigan was consistently, I think, at 80 to 90%. There wasn't anything close to 120% that I can find. So I personally would dismiss that because I can't find any evidence to back that up. Now, if you're on the other side, and I don't want to talk about things from one side or another. However, if you are somebody who wants me to change my view and to maybe come a bit more across the middle to the other side and really buy into this fraudulent argument, because you do need more than just, let's say, your base to be able to make this thing fly. You need to have the independents. You need to have the people that are center left to really buy into this argument so that you can maybe make a case for it. Well, to be fair, you don't need my point of view. You need evidence.
Poll book off by 30,000 votes. That's not the case.
What did you guys do? Take it and do something crazy to it?
So again, you're in a committee hearing, and Rudy Giuliani has pulled somebody onto the stand for what is a televised hearing, and you're doing this whole thing to make a case to people who maybe aren't buying into this idea. You're trying to really convince people that we need to investigate this. We need to delay the results. And her making a statement that, what did you do? Take it and do something crazy to it. He's actually just asking a question, trying to get her point of view. He's trying to learn what she knows. So maybe he can, gather why Rudy Giuliani is so insistent that there was fraud. We're trying to get some evidence here from you so that we can help you make that case.
So how many ballots would you estimate in front of you that you observed were counted multiple times in the machine? Can you put a number to it, an estimated number?
At least 30,000.
At least 30,000.
This isn't counting, the ballots that are found in rivers, the ballots found under rocks. I had called my manager over to a specific.
So just jumping back to that, I did do a little bit of reading. And you have to, if you want to vote absentee, I think in both Michigan and Georgia, where they're talking about there may be some fraudulent ballots, you have to apply. And in Georgia specifically, you have to apply in person. Ballots are not just, yes and, Trump, Biden, tick a box. That's not how it works. You need to show identification, which isn't necessarily, mandatory in every state, but I think in the states in question, you have to show voter ID, or not voter ID, but you have to show ID. And a ballot has to be applied for. You don't just have ballots sitting, and there was no evidence anywhere of ballots in rivers or under rocks. I think there was applications that were found. Applications are different. An application doesn't do anything. You need to apply. You need to give identification as who you are. You need to apply for a ballot, and that ballot is earmarked for you specifically, your address, your name, and you have to sign that. And then what's happening is when you get that ballot in process. So in Michigan, if I remember correctly, you have to go in person with your application to get an absentee ballot. And then you have to bring it in at a time when you can before the election. And then what happens is they have to certify that ballot by checking the signature on the application versus the signature on the ballot. So there's quite a process to this, and she's just starting to make shit up. And this is starting to lose me now.
Tabulating machine. At that point, I was just really frustrated and upset. I could tell what was going on. I knew what was going on at that point.
What was going on?
He was in on it. They were all in on it.
In on what?
So he's asking these questions to his witness, which I think surely they're going to tell him to stop the crosstalk. But he's realizing that his witness, his star witness, is not going down the path that he wants. She's not giving any information. You're in on it. That's just sort of, I'm giving you my opinion with no real reason outside of I have a bias. This person's in on it.
They were cheating. It was very, very apparent. It was apparent he knew. It was apparent that he was in on it. And when he caught on to me knowing that he was in on it, he just wanted nothing to do with me.
So this is nothing again. I have nothing. He was in on it. I don't even know what it is.
I called the FBI on the 8th, November 8th. I talked to two separate women, over 40 minutes. The first one, gave her all my information. The phone mysteriously cut out, and she never called me back. I was waiting for her to call me back. She never called me back.
I'm guessing she probably had a lunch date or something that was more important. I would imagine after the first 15, 20 minutes, she probably realized that she was listening to nothing but conspiratorial talk with no evidence, because that's kind of what we've heard from her in when she's had the spotlight.
I had to call them back, and they never called me back. Never got a call back. Still haven't got a call back. And I had somebody else working on it that has a neighbor that's an old FBI agent, and still haven't heard back from that.
So they're listing her as an extraordinary, if this is true, as an extraordinary witness. And they're saying her claims are incorrect or not credible, which I believe. I don't so far haven't heard anything that makes me want to investigate this.
Timothy Kenny, he writes that your description of the events at the TCF Center does not square with any other affidavits.
Yeah.
He says that there are,
My mistake.
excuse me, I'm speaking.
Please,
Thank you.
let's let the representative finish,
Go ahead.
and then you can.
He writes that there are no other reports of lost data or tabulating machines that jammed repeatedly every hour during the count. He also writes that neither Republican nor Democratic challengers nor city officials substantiate your version of these events. The allegations simply are not credible, is what.
One of the other things that he said in there, which I read, was one of the points I guess the Trump legal team was making, was that based on the spike in votes coming in, the tabulating machines could not keep up with the spike. So the spike was greater than the speed with which the tabulating machines could process that. And even that right there, I looked that piece of evidence up, just said, okay, fine. That sounds like something I can investigate. And what I read was the tabulating machines, again, this is where I learned they weren't connected to the internet. They dump data in lots, because these machines aren't connected to anything. So like anything else, you tabulate this information and then you collect it at a specific time, and then you take it to upload it, so to speak, to register it as a counted vote. I don't know what that process is, but the idea that the tabulating machines were contradicting the way data was being released was proof enough that this was fraudulent is bullshit. And it's easy to check. I went and I looked up. The counting machines are not connected to the internet. We process the data in lumps, in big groupings. So that makes sense to me. What she's saying is, again, I'm not getting anything from her or from the Trump team that tells me maybe I'm not understanding this correctly. I feel like I've done my due diligence, and they've not given me any information to say that maybe I need to reinvestigate that.
What Judge Kenny writes. So my question for you is, you're making claims here today that there's systematic fraud in what's going on in our elections. Are the courts also tied up in that fraud?
Let me tell you what I did by accident.
All right, before we listen to this, what I'm sure is going to be quite groundbreaking information. Pardon me. That's where I kind of sit on the side when I'm looking at these conspiratorial speakers. And we touched on it a bit with the UFO conspiracy a couple of weeks ago. And that's a question I would ask. So if, let's say, the courts have checked the affidavits, have talked to loads of witnesses, and her witness testimony doesn't square with anything anybody else in the room says, nor is it consistent, you then have to ask the question, so if that's the case, why should we believe you? Are the courts now involved? Which is a fair question. That's the only way that this holds any water still. The courts are trying to keep you back.
Okay. I gave Channel 7 an interview that they tied in to that and made me the witness that's uncredible. Guess what? There's going to be a couple behind me that are going to say the same thing I just said. I was working for.
I don't understand that. If you understand what she's saying, I don't get that. I think a lot of times when we look at conspiratorial thinkers, I guess I liken her to like a flat earther, where they feel like I think when you have somebody who believes in conspiracy theories, they feel like they're kind of the chosen one, and that they're the ones who know and are trying to save the day. And that's very much this is just what I'm getting from this. I'm trying my best to really not get too involved in my biases, but I'm just listening to all this, and it's just garbage. It's garbage. And this is somebody that Rudy Giuliani, who's supposed to be, he was quite a gifted prosecutor at one time. What he did as far as I don't remember exactly, but he tried a bunch of cases against the mob in a manner that had never been done. And he was highly successful because he had taken creative steps in fighting the mob. So he was at one point a gifted litigator. And now, if I were speaking to this woman for 5 minutes, the first thing I would think was, I don't care what she knows. We just need to take her affidavit and her statement and not put her on the stand, because she is a loose cannon that just says shit that really makes her look like she doesn't know what she's talking about. I mean, all the claims she's making, she was an IT consultant working on Dominion machines. She's not an expert on the election, not an expert on the process.
Dominion, yes.
Okay.
Something very, very suspicious too, must I add, that we were not allowed to wear name tags at all. We were not allowed to talk about who we worked for. They were very secretive. They didn't want anybody knowing anything about them.
Why is it that we're not having more people come forward? I mean, it seems
It's a
like
fair
if
question.
there
I'll
was
tell
all
you
this
why.
widespread fraud that, we have dozens and dozens of people.
I'll tell you why. My life has been destroyed. My life has been completely destroyed because of this. I've lost family. I've lost friends. I've been threatened. My kids have been threatened.
I think that's plausible. That's the most plausible thing she has said, is she has been threatened, because things are very divisive right now. And I can definitely see bad people doing bad things because she's being so out in front with this. She is making herself heard. She's been on TV being interviewed. So I 100% believe what she's saying here.
I've had to move. I've had to change my phone number. I had to get rid of social media. Nobody wants to come forward. They're getting threatened. Their lives are getting ruined. I can't even get an actual job anymore. I can't.
But you don't have to come. So what I don't understand about this argument necessarily, though, and I think it's fair to say that she's probably been treated unfairly by people, if we forget about the nature and way she's speaking. I think when we look at the people that have come forward, you don't have to, when you come forward in as far as on an affidavit, you give evidence to, let's say, Rudy Giuliani. You can do so with some level of anonymity. You don't have to go on TV, and you don't have to go into these committee hearings to have credible testimony that is usable, something that we can investigate off of. These affidavits are not evidence in itself to convict or to overturn an election. It's evidence that maybe we should be, delaying the results and really analyzing this data.
Because Democrats like to ruin your lives. That's why.
All right.
I know what I saw, and I signed something saying that if I'm wrong, I can go to prison.
Okay.
Did you?
Okay,
I'm just trying to ask you a legitimate question here.
Yeah, let's let Representative Johnson ask his question, and then don't interrupt him. And then if you want to respond to it, that's fine. Did you have more, Representative?
Yeah, I guess I just want to keep following back up with the poll book. So are we saying that the poll book is either wildly off, or that they are filling in names?
It's wildly off, and dead people voted, and illegals voted.
Okay.
So what is her job again? Her job is, how does she know illegals and dead people voted? So she was responsible for, she's an IT consultant responsible for Dominion Machines, whose sole job is to take a ballot and count the result. So I believe, if I'm wrong about this, again, let me know. But the Dominion machine is a counting tool. It's not a tool that cross-references this data versus, whether this person had a correct application in the poll book. Her job is to make sure the machines are counting things. So she's on the stand saying that dead people voted and immigrants voted. And to me, this just sounds exactly like the line or the script from anybody who is an avid Trump supporter. And I'm not saying that I'm going to be very clear. I'm not saying that illegals and dead people didn't vote. I want to say that, but that's not the point of this. The point of this is she's making a statement that she has no frame of reference nor evidence for, and it just makes everything she says absolute garbage.
So that's my answer.
I think we're going to move on.
Yeah.
Do you have a point of
I
order?
love how you can
What's
just
your
say
point?
So I saw that and I thought, okay, I still don't believe there's fraud. And then I saw another friend of mine shared something, and he messaged me and he said, this is pretty good. Okay, I'll have a look at it. And it's back to my old friend Dan Bongino. Let me just make sure I've got this on here. So Dan Bongino. I don't know why it's not coming up here. Let me remove that for a second. I will try to bring that back up again. So I thought, okay, so the people that I know and respect are going to look at this and probably think it's a big joke. They're not going to take it overly seriously. And lo and behold, my friend shared a video, which is from Dan Bongino, really celebrating this testimony. And if I was a supporter of Donald Trump, this would be something I would want hidden. I would be embarrassed by this if this was what my team was putting forward as their striker to come on and score the goal late. If this is who we're really counting on to save democracy. But this was what Dan Bongino shared, which I think was from Trey Crowder. So I'm going to share this. And I saw this and I don't know.
Rudy going full digitized Thug Life glasses. But Rudy Giuliani was at a hearing in Michigan about voter fraud yesterday, and some lawmaker decided he was going to give Rudy a little bit of remember that there was that video years ago, that NFL referee 15 yards, he was giving him the business. It's, if you've watched football before the Colin Kaepernick days, it's a famous video. It's been around forever. Remember that show? He was giving him the business. So this lawmaker in Michigan tries to give Rudy Giuliani the business yesterday, and Rudy's having none of this. Hat tip louder with Crowder. He has a great video.
Yeah, Crowder's, it was his video.
Audio podcast as well. Check this out. He goes full digitized Thug Life glasses, Rudy Giuliani. And check this one out. This is cool.
No one has found any evidence whatsoever of any of your wrongdoing. And why should we not believe the reported attempts of you to try to seek a pardon from the president?
I will ask that he be disciplined for that. That is a defamation of my professional character.
As I said,
reported.
Just for
Mr.
Giuliani,
let me ask
for the record,
question.
we haven't lost 39 cases. We've only brought 3. So you're wrong about that. Second, the reason why people are reaching those conclusions is because, like you, they don't have the discipline, maybe the intelligence, I don't know, to read through this. You can't tell me there's no evidence when I have a couple of thousand affidavits from people. You can't tell me that your credibility is better than the credibility of those people. They swore under oath. You didn't.
Rudy going full digitized Thug Life glasses. I emailed the Crowder team, like, you got to let me use that. Hilarious. Watch the video, rumble.com/Bungito. Check it out on Crowder too, Louder with Crowder.
Did anyone else find that hilarious? I gave it a chance. I watched it. And the second bit, I think, is about Melissa Carone, so I misspoke. But I don't know. I think Rudy Giuliani, if I'm going to be charitable and say that he in his position did well to respond to that, I don't think that person was put in their place, because he held up a prop with what he says are 2,000 affidavits. So 2,000 statements from people who may or may not know what they're talking about. And those statements don't really give us much of an insight into much right now. It gives us a pattern that we can look into, and the pattern has been looked into, and there hasn't been any evidence found as far as I could tell. I'll go into that more in a bit.
Does that a lot. He's always got a good knack for humor, but Rudy's taking none of this. Rudy's like, hey, listen, Daddy-O, so you're questioning my integrity. I've got a binder full of sworn affidavits from people who swore under oath under penalty of law that they saw potential malfeasance in the election. You're not interested in it at all. You're interested in personal attacks on me. Rudy's having none of it. Questions the man's intelligence, which of course I'm questioning too. But that wasn't it from this hearing, folks.
So before he goes on to the next piece, I want to talk about the affidavit thing. So if you don't know what an affidavit is, and I'm not a lawyer, but I did look up what an affidavit is. I think we generally understand an affidavit is when somebody makes a statement and they make it official to the point that they do so under oath. And if they are caught lying or they're wrong about something, knowingly wrong, then they can be put in prison. They can be fined heavily. You're pretty much putting your money where your mouth is. Yeah, you're putting your money where your mouth is. And when I looked into it, I thought, well, surely if I make a statement about something that I believe, my intent is that I'm correct. I know what I'm talking about. So if we take Melissa Carone, she believes. I think she truly believes. Well, I don't know. That's a bit of. Again, I'm being charitable, but she truly believes that she is correct in what she is saying. And I think if, let's say, it turns out that they have proven what she has said to almost look like she's lying, I think she would be able to then come back and say, you know what, with the information that I'm seeing, I was just wrong. And I found cases where people are not prosecuted. People are given a chance to recant their affidavit or to correct the record straight away. And if somebody corrects the record straight away to say, this information has come to light and I was wrong, then they won't get prosecuted. An affidavit is somebody who believes something, saying, I believe it so much so that I'm going to put jail time or financial risk or fine. I'm willing to take the risk that I would get fined. But in reality, courts aren't that keen to prosecute somebody who isn't knowingly deceptive, which is why they give people the chance to say, this is not true. We know this is not true. Were you doing this on purpose or were you not? Are you happy to recant? Are you going to stick with your story and you're going to continue to lie? Because then you'll be prosecuted. And from what I can understand, from what I've read, which, I'm not a lawyer and I could be wrong about this, so I'm happy to be corrected. But you don't see many people who are happy to recant, even if they've been caught out making a mistake on an affidavit, getting prosecuted. So I don't think it's that great. 2,000 affidavits is not enough for me to go, wow. Because if, let's say, to the standard of the people who Rudy Giuliani is putting on as his star witnesses, those are the people he's handpicked and said, we want you to be front and center and representing the affidavit team. I can't imagine it gets much better when you start going back through those affidavits. And what do those affidavits say? I have an affidavit saying I saw somebody pull something out of their pockets. And I think it's a ballot. I think they pulled one ballot out of their pocket and stuffed it into the grouping. Okay, well that's I don't know how I can use that to overturn the election or I'm trying not to use that term to make sure that every correct vote is counted. I don't know how I can use that. So that I really can't have you come up onto the stand. We're going to stick with our gold standard, which is Melissa Carone. So I don't understand this obsession with affidavits. The affidavit should give you evidence to investigate. And with elections, they're so structured in how they're set up and the checks and balances that go into these things. If we look at Georgia, for example, in Georgia, there was, I believe the Trump legal team was claiming with a video that there was ballots that were being brought in suitcases and then added to the kitty to be counted. Now, this has been debunked by election officials, Republican election officials, saying that what they perceived as suitcases were the normal balloting receptacles, normal balloting bins. And when they watched the video, when the election officials watched the video of counting in Georgia, for example, there was no wrongdoing. There was nothing that they could find that was out of the ordinary. Now, that doesn't mean that there wasn't anything wrong, but there wasn't any evidence to say that we need to investigate that there was an issue. People that were overseeing the election said there wasn't. And interestingly, when you look at Georgia as an example, where we believe there's ballots being brought in and counted, in October there was 1,000 ballots, I think, in a primary that were flagged up as people had voted twice. And this was a big story. And I don't know how many millions of voters there are in Georgia, but 1,000 votes is a small percentage. And for the most part, people, I believe, from what I can gather, what I've read, there's probably quite a few people in that group who submitted their ballot and then showed up to the polling station to vote, not sure whether their vote counted or not. And it was an honest mistake. And that was caught. That was caught without, I guess, Rudy Giuliani and his team saying we need to have a look at it. It was caught because there are checks and balances in place to make sure that voter fraud doesn't really happen. I think the Brennan Center, who investigates elections and data on security and things of that nature, I think there was only 207 files they had historically on hand of instances of voter fraud. You generally tend to see voter fraud more in the smaller areas, not so much in presidential elections. There are some instances, but usually they're negligible at best. And I still don't understand how, when you're making an argument for voter fraud across, let's say, a presidential campaign, especially when you have the volume of mail-in votes that they had, and this is where I think we had this. I used Dan Bongino's video. I might be butchering his name. I used his video before as an example. And in that video, they were talking about how dangerous mail-in voting is. And I just don't understand how you can have a targeted campaign when everybody's house, everybody's residence is a polling station effectively. They have a ballot that is assigned to their name that they have to sign and send in. How do you coordinate that to the scale of 8, 9, 10 million votes? How do you get 8, 9, 10 million votes from people who you have to guess or hope that they don't send in their own ballot and it doesn't get counted twice? You can hope that they register and don't vote, and then you send in a ballot on their behalf, because you can't just add ballots to the mix because they're cross-checked. Every ballot is cross-checked. And in Georgia and Michigan, I believe one of the things the Trump election was saying was they had more Democrats, and that was part of the name tag thing Melissa was saying. They had more Democrats in the room by far. They didn't have Democratic I guess people managing Republicans managing the process in the ballot counting stations. And that's not the law. Actually, in Michigan says that the people working in these election facilities, it has to be bipartisan. We have to have a balance of Republicans and Democrats, so there's nobody playing favorites. So that's written into the law. So that's easy to check. Okay, well, let's take a look at who worked. Are they Democrats? Are they Republicans? That's an easy one for Julie. Oh yeah, no, we've checked, and there's 85% were Democrat. We haven't seen that because they can't prove that it didn't happen. So I'm struggling with evidence. I really am at this stage.
Folks, no, it gets better. This is again the Wait There's More segment. So sometimes out on social media, especially my Parler account, I'll put out, "Hey, the hero we all need today." It's been a rough week. Can we all be honest? It's been a rough week. Things have happened. I know we're all down in the dumps sometimes. The election so far, the media's already declared a winner. So sometimes we have one of these, the hero we all need today moments. I don't know this woman. I've never met her in my life. But
so before he goes down this route, the media declared a winner. This is another thing that I don't understand from what friends I have back home are complaining about, because Donald Trump hasn't properly conceded. It's just the two-faced nature of how people are in politics now, and that this gentleman would have been in 2016, and I could probably sit here and Google a clip. Probably was complaining that when Trump won, you need to concede now. This needs to be done. The numbers, it's a done deal. He's got however many votes. It's done. And Hillary conceded at the time. Just see so many people taking a totally different stance now with numbers that are quite overwhelming, that they shouldn't be calling the election as of yet. It's the hypocrisy bothers me at times.
She's making the rounds on social media, and I think it's Mike Cernovich who he's like, "I love this woman's sass." This is terrific. This is the same.
She does have sass.
These Michigan lawmakers who don't want they don't want to be questioned about the vote count in Michigan at all. So he decides to question this. I know you've seen it. Josie gets the cheater rate. So this Michigan lawmaker thinks it's a good idea to question one of the affiants, one of the women who swore she saw something that was off, to question her integrity. She's having absolutely none of this. Remember the hits file? It starts with an S, sounds like hits. Giving a hit, if you get what I mean. Well, she has a file of hits to give, and that file is zero. This woman has 0 hits to give at all. Check this out. This is great.
That's not the case.
What did you guys do? Take it and do something crazy to it?
I'm just saying the numbers are not off by 30,000 votes. So
I know what I saw.
That they're filling in.
I know what I saw, and I signed something saying that if I'm wrong, I can go to prison. Okay. Did you?
Okay,
Someone give her she needs the glasses too. Someone should have given her, whoever sent me sent me these, the non-digitized real plastic. These are actually real. This is not an effect on the show. Paula added, someone needed this. She needed this. Wait. I can't put the cigar. I'm not putting this in my mouth again. Someone said, they need the cigar too. Paula, can we get on this? Stamps.com. We need to go. Someone shipped these out. The woman needed these. That would have been perfect. And the MAGA hat too, just like the Crowder effect. Wouldn't that have been hilarious if she did that during the hearing? Totally wrecks this idiot. She's like, no, I signed an affidavit saying I saw some really suspicious stuff. Did you sign anything? No. You're just a moron up there. Of course, politician trying to cater to your left-wing lunatic base.
So I don't understand that. I don't understand that because he is asking her questions and giving her an opportunity to really back what she's saying. He's not. Didn't show her. She looked like an idiot while he was trying to ask her politely, can you explain, how or why? Please give me every reason in the world why we should believe you. I'm giving you the opportunity and a microphone. Please tell us. And he said his leftist agenda, that gentleman, that bald-headed guy, he's great hair. He's a Republican. He's I looked it up. He's a Republican. He's not a left-wing guy at all. And I don't even think the way he came about talking to her was in any way trying to slam dunk on her or anything like that. He had a fair question. We're not seeing the poll books out by 30,000. So where are you getting this information? Please tell me something that I can work with. And it's just typical of how things are right now. We spend so much time focusing on a soundbite, and even that soundbite alone, I'm absolutely confused and befuddled as to why anybody would take this and say, this is awesome. You got to see what she said. This woman got up there and just maybe he thought she was making a mockery of this. Maybe this whole process, this hearing was a joke. And for a large part of it, it was a joke. But isn't it the Trump team that wanted the hearing? I don't know. But I watching these things, I don't quite understand how people can back certain things still. And I've been trying to give it time, been trying to give my attention and due diligence and doing research. Even what was one of the other points? One of the other points was people were talking about in these districts where votes were coming in overwhelmingly for Biden with mail-in voting, which it was impossible. Even if you forget about mail-in voting, just that volume is unprecedented, which isn't true. It isn't true. When I looked that up, we take a look at Detroit, for example. Factually, Detroit. Now, that was one of the areas where they're challenging in Michigan because the numbers that came in for Biden were something like 90. I want to say it was 96%. I actually looked up the stats. Let me find it. So Biden received 96% of absentee votes cast for the president. Trump received 3%. So that's a lot. And I think when I read that, I thought that is a hell of a lot. Overall, Biden received 94% of the vote in Detroit and Trump 5%, which marked an improvement for Trump. 4 years earlier, Democrat Hillary Clinton got 95%. Trump just got 3%. And I read prior to that, Barack Obama in Detroit got 97.5%. And Mitt Romney got what was it? It's not exactly up to 100%. It got 2%. So to say that it's unprecedented is just a joke. That's not true. It's not hard to look this stuff up, and I'm just amazed at how much airtime this gets when you can just say, yeah, that's actually happened. It's happened in that area before. And to be surprised that the votes coming in by absentee ballot are predominantly Biden supporters makes perfect sense to me. And I haven't been able to get a straight answer as to why that doesn't make sense. I watched and I did a video using Dan Bongino's video questioning the efficacy of mail-in elections, how safe they are, and how how you should be going to your polling station. If you can go to work, if you can stand outside, you can go and vote. And you listen to people being interviewed, Trump supporters, and saying, yeah, well, of course we're going to go to the polling station. And you hear the Biden campaign saying, get your vote in early. You should, use mail-in voting if it's not safe to go into the polls. And to me, it just makes too much sense as to why Trump supporters didn't vote by post. They were told that it's a corrupt system, that your vote won't be counted. You need to go to the polling place and you need to make your vote. The one thing Trump has is he has a loyal base and they listen and support what he says. So why would they contradict that? Why would we buck that trend? And when we look at these cities where they were coming in overwhelmingly Democrat, that's historically true in Detroit. Now, I've only looked at one area. I haven't looked anywhere else. But in Detroit, where they said it's impossible, it happened. And actually, Biden got less votes than Hillary, less votes percentage-wise than Barack Obama, with 96%. So it's very possible. It's very possible that Biden was getting 90% of the vote coming in from absentee ballots late in the game. So, at the end of the day, it still sounds like I'm just whining and moaning about not understanding people. And I tried to really just listen to the arguments. I looked up, I did a lot of reading on the voting process in Michigan and Georgia, just to find out maybe there's something I've missed here. And I couldn't find a single thing. The only thing I could find, the closest thing I could find to a rational argument, let me just find it here. There was one thing I found. I found a gentleman's channel. Go ahead and check him out, Bill Cushing. And on his channel, he did a thing on the video we saw. So I'm just going to share this with you. So this is somebody who is doing what Hugh and I does to a higher degree. He's got 8,500 subscribers. And he's making a case. He's making a case for this. So I'm begging you, Bill, give me a case that I can get on side with to understand why this crazy person is the central point of the argument in Michigan for the Trump
So I just
election.
want to understand. I don't know what exactly all the things that are being talked about there are, but can you tell us what you said today is the truth? Is that correct?
Sir, I wrote a written affidavit. Yes, it is 100% true.
Hi, the lady in the video was a Dominion Voting Systems contractor who worked at Detroit's TCF Center on Election Day. The TCF Center is Detroit's convention center. This is part of her testimony before the Michigan House Oversight Committee on December 2nd, 2020. She witnessed tens of thousands of ballots being counted numerous times with Dominion voting machines. Melissa Carone, a freelance IT worker who assisted Dominion at Detroit's ballot counting site from 6:15 a.m. on November 3rd to 4 a.m. the next day, before returning later for several more hours on November 4th. Ms. Carone said in an affidavit that she witnessed nothing but fraudulent actions take place. Let me repeat that. Witnessed nothing but fraudulent actions take place.
So that's been enunciated. That's a big ticket item for him. Nothing but fraudulent actions take place. And the first thing I ask when I hear that is, that sounds very hyperbolic. What do you mean? What has been fraudulent? So what she said was people were counting votes multiple times. So if they were, it's easy to check in the poll book.
The affidavit was submitted as a supplement to a lawsuit in Michigan. Here is a copy of the affidavit. Paragraph 2 states in Ms. Carone's words, during this time, I witnessed nothing but fraudulent actions take place. Paragraph 3 states that Ms. Carone witnessed ballots being counted 4 to 5 times. Paragraph 4 states that some batches of ballots were counted over 8 times. Paragraph 5 states that over 20 voting machines had 2 Democrat judges and no Republicans judging the ballot, resulting in an unfair process. resulting in an unfair process. Those are Ms. Caron's words. Paragraph 8 states that 2 vans pulled into the garage of the counting room, one on the day shift.
So before we go to that, just some of the other points that he raised. Well, to be fair to the guy, he may just be highlighting the points that Melissa Corona is making. But to say some batches of ballots counted 8 times, just want to clarify that I found the one point that I found. What the data says, so what the election boards say, is there were 134 counting boards handling absentee ballots in Detroit. Of those, 39 boards, or 29% of them were imbalanced. So he's talking about the poll books versus the votes that were in. So imbalance means that the number of votes that were counted matches what we expected to see counted. And 64 boards, or 48%, were individually off by plus or minus 4 votes, or fewer each, according to results certified by the court's bipartisan board of canvassers. There were 31 boards, or 23% of the total, off by 5 or more votes, according to data from Wayne County Clerk's office. And that is a legal thing. If we go back to the bipartisanship, as far as in poll watchers, but also in people working at these stations, they legally have to be bipartisan. You can't have 2 Democrats. It's against Michigan law, I guess. So that, if that's true, it's easy to check, and you would think the Trump team would have that front and center. So yes, we have these 2 people that were registered working on this machine at this time, and they're both Democrats. Can you explain why this is the case? Is that's not the law in Michigan?
8 times. Paragraph 5 states that over 20 voting machines had 2 Democrat judges and no Republicans judging the ballot.
So the law in Michigan, again, people that are watching, poll watchers, are bipartisan. And that has been confirmed. If, let's say, anybody watching this has seen otherwise, why is it that I don't know this? Hey, Reg, how we doing?
Resulting in an unfair process. Resulting in an unfair process. Those are Ms. Caron's words. Paragraph 8 states that 2 vans pulled into the garage of the counting room, one on the day shift and one on the night shift. The vans were to have been bringing food. Mrs. Caron saw no food coming out of the vans.
So what does that prove? What does that prove? Ms. Caron worked as a poll watcher. So again, you're asking me to take this seriously or pay attention to that. She worked as an IT consultant. So did she work for the company did she help organize the food? Does she know what the vans were there for? Did she see any documentation to confirm what the vans were there for? If the vans were empty, did she see what was in them at any point? There's a lot of questions here that have no answer. That, to me, as a neutral, or somebody who claims to be a neutral, doesn't, I can't get on board with it. Can't get on board with anything you're saying.
Shortly after the second van left, it was announced that Michigan had discovered 100,000 ballots. Now, Ms. Caron has reported that she and her children have received death threats.
So before we go into that, the ballots discovered, again, have to match the poll books. You can't have ballots without poll books. If there is ballots without poll books, and we saw this in Georgia in October, where they found 1,000 votes were cast twice, it was very easy to pick up on because people register with their ballot and they make their vote. If there's 2 votes for that one person, we can figure that out quite easily. If there's 100,000 people if there's 100,000 votes, let's say that we're able to slip past the keeper, so to speak. What that means is that they were able to coordinate with 100,000 people who they knew were going to register but not vote. And then they were able to grab those ballots or which ballots are applied for and assigned to the individual. They were able to coordinate those 1,000 ballots and slip them in because they couldn't go, the person who's slipping them in isn't the voter, in other words. So we have to slide those in to be counted, and they have to be for Biden. I can't in any logistical world, make heads or tails of how people think that's possible.
She has had to move and cannot find work anywhere because, in her words, Democrats like to ruin people.
Hyperbole.
So there seems a fraud is evident in the 2020 general election. Well, I hope this helps. Have a good day.
Bill, you seem like a nice guy, but I didn't see anything that was evident. So I spent, I want to say it would have been a good 3 hours this week just trying to find something that I can bring today that I can say, yeah, I can see why people are concerned about the election being bullshit. Can't find anything. So I think for now I'm going to have to stay as a fairly left of center person, and I'm going to have to go back and say that the election was very fair. And there was no funny business, no fraud. Veg, and I don't know that fraud is a Democrat-Republican thing. It isn't. Well, according to most people, it isn't. But in this day and age, fraud is a tool used by the Democrats to win an election. And Veg, I think you're a lot like me. You're fairly independent in your thought, your thinking. And I think a lot of people view somebody who is, let's say, anti-Trump as somebody who is a left-wing liberal, when in reality, I'm a centrist who just really despises and I'm embarrassed by the way things are going now. But even if fraud wasn't a Democrat or Republican thing, we need evidence. I also don't buy the argument that people would have seen fraud if it happened, because that's not true. Most of the time with other types of fraud, we usually don't see it. I think what's interesting about that point is if you could see the fraud, I mean, it would be so obvious and easy to catch. So if there's all of these affidavits, 2,000 affidavits Rudy Giuliani has of people that witness fraud, they're not doing a very good job of trying to steal the election. But if it's attuned by Democrats, that's besides the point. Well, yeah, that is exactly besides the point. I mean, fraud, that's the whole point, is you need to go back to evidence. It's do you have evidence or don't you have evidence? And when we take a look at what Melissa was saying about, it's Democrats, they want to ruin your lives. It's just, that's a nonsense statement in itself. I think people just want evidence one way or the other. I'm independent, never have and never will vote to party my whole life. My father said, I'll never forget this, because my father's a mathematician. He's a math teacher. I guess you would call himself a mathematician. And he used to tell me to vote even if I didn't know who I wanted to vote for. And part of the reason to vote, just chuck a number in the air, is you're throwing out the algorithms, all the data that these pollsters look out for that work for the campaigns. The whole idea of just chucking out a random vote really skews the data. And it's just more of a thing. If you don't know who to vote for, just vote. Just pick anybody. Just do something that's different. I never did or would have voted for Trump, but I'm absolutely certain there was fraud. I never did or would have voted for Trump, but I'm absolutely certain there was fraud. So you're saying, where are you saying there's fraud? Are you saying there's fraud from Donald Trump is fraudulent? And you can base truth on evidence if in the process you deny the ability to obtain the evidence, though. So I always have to read things twice. You can't base truth on evidence if in the process you deny the ability to obtain the evidence, though. You can't base truth on evidence if in the process you deny the ability to obtain the evidence, though. That's a very interesting thought, and I'm trying to really square that. So you can't base truth on evidence. Evidence is facts. I guess science can't prove. Science can only qualify something, really. So if we look at it from a science perspective, you can't base truth on evidence if in the process you deny the ability to obtain the evidence. Yeah, so I guess if you don't have all of the evidence, I don't know if that's what you're saying, but if you don't have all of the evidence, or you're not able to collect the evidence, you can't base truth on a lack of information. No, the question is to ask the opposite one. Thanks for your patience with me. The question is to ask is the opposite one. What is it in a person's character and experience that makes them think fraud doesn't happen? Well, this is contrary, I guess, to what a conspiracy theorist this is quite contrary to what a conspiracy theorist would believe. A conspiracy theorist would question it the other way around. The opposite one, what is it in a person's character experience that makes them think fraud doesn't happen? I think there's people that trust the system blindly. And in no way do I necessarily trust things blindly, but I think you need a certain burden of proof before you can take it seriously. I think if you look at anti-vaxxers, for example, you can say that, if you're the type of person that doesn't think that fraud doesn't happen, or maybe you're naive. We're having trouble, so I'm having some issues here, by the way. If I've lost you, apologies. Don't know if you're still there, Reg. So no, the question is to ask is the opposite one. So what is it in a person's character and experience to make them think fraud doesn't happen? And I think you just have people that are very much blind or trusting, overly trusting. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing to be skeptical of fraud. No conspiracy is necessary. Okay, so for example, I live in New York City. Of course, I know fraud happens. Now, if you're from Nebraska, maybe you're so sheltered your whole life you think it doesn't. Which New York City is notorious for fraud, and I think Philadelphia, where I'm from, and Giuliani will tell you, is notorious for fraud. But I also think people are focused on their region, their area. I think that's a fair point. People from Nebraska aren't going to give a shit about what goes on in New York. But I don't necessarily think that doesn't mean that it's in people's nature to not think fraud happens or to not believe fraud happens. I think it's just about what you have visibility to. I think every day you work and you put food on your table and you pay your bills and you're focused on things that are specific to, making yourself financially fine, to make yourself stay afloat. And you don't necessarily worry about the systems that are in place. If you think about Trump being in office, if we forget about everything to do with the pandemic, my life or my friend's life back home aren't that dissimilar. They're still going to work and they're still doing their thing because I live in a very fortunate situation. The people I know are probably fairly fortunate that they have food and work and don't have to worry for much and they get to go on holiday. And I think people just don't really spend time working on causes or paying attention to causes or, trying to identify fraud. We're just out of curiosity, what fraud? So I'm just trying to maybe gather the motivation for, just so I can get the bigger picture of what you're saying, Bitch. Everywhere is notorious for fraud, but when you aren't intermingling with 8 million people, there's a lot you don't encounter. So you develop your own naivety about how things are. I don't necessarily think it's naivety, though. If, let's say, so we have checks and balances in place in government to be able to pick up on fraud. And there's a lot of fraud that does happen, I would assume, that we aren't aware of, things that happen higher echelons of government. There's things that are top secret, things that just happen that most people don't give a shit about. And whether that's naivety or not, I don't know that I would say necessarily personally I think that's naivety. I just think that there's just times where you're not focused on the bigger picture of things that don't impact you day to day. I think people aren't naive when there's information or evidence to suggest that there is fraud or there is, I think people who maybe aren't worried about fraud in the election are more open to believing there's fraud as far as it's pertaining to Donald Trump. Yeah. So with your views, Veg, where do you sit? So what's the motivation for? Do you feel like people aren't really switched on with fraud? So I think you don't believe there's fraud in the election. If we look at the content, do you believe there was fraud in the election? Do you believe that Donald Trump and his team have a case, which is fair if you do? Or do you think that there was fraud as far as how Trump got elected? Do you think that his behavior with his golf clubs, with how he's using his position to bolster his bottom line, fraud is not a Trump issue? No, but we can accuse somebody or something of fraud. So where would the naivety be for the fraud, I guess? You're doing a very good job in filling in for Hugh, by the way. I'm curious. Because fraud is not a Trump issue. That's 100% right. Fraud is fraud. It's black and white. you know, not only is there fraud, I would go so far as to say people have a duty to find fraud and identify it. But that's what checks and balances are for. So if you look at this election as an example, they have. I think when you look at in Pennsylvania how they count votes, you have people sitting at a table, and I think you have two sets of people. So I say this votes for Biden. Goes to somebody else who says, "Yep, I see that as Biden," and then it goes to another team who confirm that that's for Biden before it moves on. Not only that, then you have people who check the voter registry versus the vote itself. So there's systems in place. That's the whole idea of democracies. You're supposed to have these systems, these checks and balances in place to check for fraud. So do you think that people should be doing more than that? Do you think that the systems in place right now to monitor fraud aren't good enough? Which is a fair point. That very well may be the case. But it's an interesting topic, especially not something I ever thought that we would be talking about at this stage in the game. And Reg, if you were watching earlier, I just spent a better part of a couple hours just looking through evidence, just to try to put my biases aside, just to see what people that I know and love are, there's some people I do respect who believe that maybe this election was a fraudulent thing. I can't find anything to say that it was. But, maybe that is naivety. Maybe I'm being naive. Anyways, well, I think on that note, I'm going to start wrapping up here. I am looking forward to having Hugh back. It is difficult to go through these things without Hugo on my side. So, mate, I'm looking forward to having you back. And, Veg, before we go here, so we have the technology to minimize it. Maybe people should have to use fingerprint tech and present their fingerprint to vote. Yeah. I think for me, so I work in IT. I'm not a technician. I work more in the messaging side of things. I think what we got to be careful of is getting too much tech involved. And I think the Dominion system being not connected to the internet is a very purposeful thing. And fingerprint technology is very good to be able to identify a person. I think what some people will say, and I don't know what my view is when we start looking at the minority communities, or we look at the poor communities, there's a fear of authority, especially when you have discrimination in the community of registering yourself and putting a fingerprint down. And I could see that really stopping people who are nervous of authority because of historical discrimination from registering and voting. To me, a fingerprint could be a good way to really quell the votes of poor people. And I'm not saying that that's the purpose of that, but I can see that being the outcome. By the way, let me say, I'm not trying to say Trump would have won. I'm just saying there was fraud. Maybe it would have made Biden win that much more. I don't know that I think, so my view is I'm maybe being naive here, but I think with the number of mail-in votes, fraud would have been virtually impossible. I just can't see how you can coordinate to the degree that the absentee ballots would allow you to do. It's too easy to check. The absentee voting system, and I'm familiar with it because I've been voting absentee for the last 14 or 15 years of living abroad. To be able to vote by absentee ballots, and to be able to coordinate fraud, it would just, for me, I can't even comprehend the logistics to make that happen. There's pros and cons to fingerprint tech. There's also pros and cons to not having it. I don't know if people are expecting no cons in an alternative option, but that's silly to expect. There's cons in whatever you do. I think that's, and I hope I'm not losing you. I keep getting a notification that I might be losing connection with Periscope. But I think it's just, if we go beyond the pros and cons of fingerprint technology versus, let's say, just rocking up and saying you are who you are, I think that the balancing act is making sure that people feel that they're a part of the system. And if that system discriminates, or if people believe that system discriminates, so I'm not making the statement that it does. People have an opinion that it does. But I do believe that people believe that's the case. And I do believe if people were asked to register with ID and a fingerprint, to then be able to go vote. That would be additional barriers to stop people who are less educated and maybe don't trust the system from voting. I'm not saying fingerprints a bad idea, but there's not a lot of evidence to say that you necessarily need to identify yourself with a photo to be able to vote. That's why I think mail-in voting, for me, after this whole thing, I think mail-in voting is the way forward, because you have a residence, you have a signature. It's so hard to coordinate anything on scale. Our fears stop us from working towards more ideal situations. If we fear what will happen if we get what we want, then we don't do it. We unfortunately are a fear-driven society. That's true, but it's educating people. It's not a straightforward thing. I don't think it's about people being afraid to change. I think it's about educating people. I think if you look at Donald Trump, he would be 100% for, which it's got its merits for fingerprint, having a fingerprint identification system. But do we need, is there enough evidence out there to say that we need to really do more than match a signature or see a driver's license? Even voter ID, there's data out there that says voter ID is going to stop people from coming in and voting. Facial tech is pretty good. Even with Face ID is supposed to be on if you have an iPhone, it's supposed to be better than the fingerprint. I think people, Hugh will say, and Hugh asked the question, why we haven't done anything online, because we can do online banking. But that just means we're opening up an access point for people to then fraudulently access the election system, which is why I'm a tech person. I don't even write things down. My handwriting's gotten so bad because I can't write. I do everything on computer, on keyboard. But I'm somebody who's really leaning towards doing everything just on paper. Residents, you have a residence, you can vote, you can show up, you can proclaim what you want, and it can be registered if you can be confirmed who you are. I just can't see any large-scale voting operation that isn't easily caught, where you then, let's say, get 3 million actors to rock up and say there's somebody else who just may happen to show up and vote anyway and confirm who they are. It's just, when you read about voting, just if you look at fraud as it relates to elections, it's only local elections that are impacted, because you can harvest ballots from smaller elections, and 20,000 makes a difference. Whereas generally speaking, and I know that's contradictory to how this election went, but for the most part, you can't coordinate on a large scale in a presidential election to steal it with the current checks and balances. I don't believe. You call me naive if you want. I just don't believe it. I don't think you would. I mean, facial tech where you present your face in person, not by the internet. Yeah, but you're going to have to, how are people going to register that? It's then getting people to trust the system that they feel they're discriminated by. And let's say they're worried they're going to be convicted of crimes they didn't commit, which happens a lot in minority and poor communities. And that's what people are afraid of. When I voted, they didn't ask me for ID. Some states, they don't. When I went to vote, when I was in the States, I would just show up and say who I was. And there's not a lot of evidence to say and that may very well be fraudulent, but there's not a lot of evidence out there to say that that's going to impact anything. Let's say you have 2 million people that just rock up and take somebody's ballot. There's going to be patterns, isn't there? There's going to be people that are going to show up and prove they are who they are and say, no, I haven't voted yet. But I think it's something worth researching. Maybe something we can talk about next time Hugh is away again. Take a look at voter fraud in a bit more detail. But when I voted, it was just a matter of sending him. I had to apply for my ballot. They sent it in, and then I had to send it back. And when I sent back my ballot, I could then track it. So as the voter, I could track it to see that it got to its destination. And absentee ballots, as I knew before this election, are counted after the fact. It's an interesting conversation, though. So, as you're probably just waking up, I am getting ready to lock it down. I don't know if you can tell from the ambient light, but it's nighttime here. But I appreciate you jumping on, and hopefully we'll see you back up again. He will be back in next week. We're going to take a look. I don't know if this is your speed, but we're going to be taking a look at, I think we're planning on doing something with Bigfoot. Ooh, this sounds good. I saw the word grenade, Veg. And not to throw a grenade in the controversy, but I live in a Russian neighborhood, and I'm pretty sure most of my neighbors are undocumented. That is a bit of a grenade. We need to come back to that one at another time. I guess my question to you would be, how do you know they're undocumented? Because I would think Russia's a harder area to get in. I guess they fly over here and stay here. Russia's not a poor country, so there's not a lot of people trying to get out of Russia. I know Russians, and they don't like to, well, they're very proud, and none of them generally tend to move abroad. The ones that I know, they usually head back. They walk right in with no ID. So if they walk right in with no ID, don't they have a poll book then? Don't they have to say who they are? Because they're under surveillance and never leave the house. So do you think that any of those neighbors voted? Do you think any of those undocumented neighbors voted? It's a known thing in New York City, you can tell. Fair enough, I don't live in New York City, so I can't comment. I have to take your word for it. But then, how many, so do you think any of them voted? I guess. Is that, I don't know if that's what you're saying. No, I handed in a voter card to them. They glanced at it and nodded. Yeah. So does your voter card have your details on it? So could I have stolen your voter card and used it? While you're answering, I'm just going to check. I think I have to go for dinner soon. So they handed in a voter card and they glanced and they nodded. Just checking to see what time I have to be. Yes, but they didn't look at it. So how did you get your voter card? Did you have to write in for it? And I could have passed it to the next person after. But there is one voter card per person, or dropped it in the street and someone picked it up and then changed the vote. Which is why, so for me, this if anything backs up the fact that it's almost impossible to do anything on a large scale in the mail, right? That makes sense. So you for me, that just makes me feel even better about it, even without you giving ID. I just don't understand how somebody can overturn 1 million votes in New York with that process. Because there's going to be 1 million people, you have to randomly select them, unless you choose dead people. And even then, dead people, you don't see it. That's an easy thing to cross-check, and that's something that normally is caught. It doesn't go unnoticed. There is fraud, yeah. I think it's fair to say there is fraud, but the fraud that's been found has been negligible at best. No, sorry. I'm just making the point, and you're right. That is a straw man if I was making an argument. I wasn't making an argument about that. What I was saying was the reason I don't think that fraud in, let's say, a presidential election is an issue, that system you're talking about, I can't see any good way that you can organize enough votes to overturn an election. And I think to do that, you would need 1 million. So this is my opinion, and I am in strongman territory. But I think you would need, upwards of 1 million plus to be able to make a dent. And let's say you weren't going to focus on 1 million in one area. Fine. So let's say you focus on 10,000, 5,000, and you spread it all around the country. The logistics involved in that have just got to be astronomical. But that's not me making an argument that it's not possible. That's me giving you why I think it's unlikely. That's just my opinion. It's these things have been investigated for years, and I've been doing a lot of research on it recently, just so that I'm not one of those naive people saying, yeah, it didn't happen. I've actually done quite a bit of reading on voter fraud. Did a lot in Florida because my sister lives in Florida. I looked it up quite a bit in Florida because they have this dichotomy where they are very pro-Trump but very pro-mail-in ballot. So very interesting, right? Which is why I would say, I'm not saying it would sway an election, just that there was fraud, and that's fair. I think you're very, very right on that. I think it's likely there is fraud. I think when they look at every election, there's usually like a small percentage, like 0.5%, which is a lot of people, maybe even less, where they are identifying some anomalies. People voting twice, or people, the popular one is harvesting. So especially in mail-in votes, harvesting ballots. And what harvesting ballots means, you're making sure that people are voting that you know are going to vote for you or vote for your cause. So it's all very interesting. Well, Veg, listen, I'm sorry you're jumping on and I'm jumping off here, but it is time for me to go and have my dinner before I get in trouble. So I really appreciate the conversation. It was really, genuinely really enjoyed that, and I hope we see you again. To everybody else who soldiered on with the hour and a half that I was only meant to be on for a half hour, and I just sort of got lost in rambling. Thanks for watching. We're going to be up next week, and hopefully we'll catch you soon. Take care, everybody, and thank you, Veg, for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.